Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. This tale of nuclear revenge happened a while back and is a work in progress. It is too good not to tell, and I will try to keep you updated down the track. Brian's neighbor is a typical greedy career landlord who left their rental house in disrepair. The poor tenant was living in the cold house, raw sewage leaking onto the lawn and holes in the house that you could see light coming out of. After multiple requests from Brian, Karen refused to get any repairs done. When the state government introduced new laws about ensuring landlords are insulating their rental properties, Karen kicked their tenant out and left the house vacant for 5 years. The old house deteriorated so much more during this time, with rats infesting the house and invading other houses nearby. Brian and his wife, with their limited funds, were able to get sufficient lending from the bank and offered to buy the house and do it up themselves to improve the neighborhood, or rent it out as there is a massive shortage of rental properties in our local county. Greedy Karen did not want to sell, nor did she want to spend a cent on the house to remedy the rodent problem. She also did not care about the effect the house was having on the aesthetics of the street. It is important to know that Karen and her wealthy family have over 100 rental properties, and due to lax tax laws in this region, they do not pay a cent, and can get tax write-offs when their properties deteriorate, then can claim on this as a loss. Long story short, some of them appear to be leeches on our society, and are one of the reasons property prices are so high, and rent prices are skyrocketing in our area. Her husband is also the chairman of the state's Landlords Association, an association that he often fronts the media for, defending landlords and putting a good media spin on them when there is negative press. Fast forward 5 years, and Brian finds out the house is going to be demolished to make way for some new houses to go in on the small section. That's good news at least, though Brian and his wife were anxious about how smoothly the demolition would go, due to the fact the houses are quite close to each other. This is important for later. Prior to demolition, the company doing it had to get samples from all sides of the house to check for asbestos. Either Karen made it difficult for the company to get down the side bordering Brian's house, or they simply were too lazy, but only samples from 3 sides, not 4, were taken. Demolition day came around, and Brian was concerned that no safety barriers had been put up to protect his house from falling bricks of the chimney, nor was there anything stopping dust and debris going all over his new deck and porch area. Later that day, Brian had the pleasure of meeting Keith. Keith is the demolition company manager that is well known around the district for only caring about money and has little regard for people or property. Keith was doing the demolition himself today, simply with a digger. Brian returned home during his break at work to check the progress of the demolition and found the demolition was already complete after only an hour or so. The demolished house was in a pile. He climbed up on his roof and, to his disbelief, found hundreds of bricks had fallen onto his roof, causing damage, though he was lucky none had fallen through into the house. Brian phoned up demolition man Keith to ask about what went wrong. Keith initially played down the damage, despite there being 200 bricks laying on Brian's roof. Even with the damage done, no apology, and the rude attitude of Keith, Brian kept his cool. "Since I did a little bit of roofing when I was younger, I can fix up the roof if you just get me 4 new sheets of roofing iron and we will call it even. Don't worry about paying for paint. I can sort that out when I paint the whole roof after the fall." Brian's roof was not in the best of shape, but it was in much worse shape after having bricks dumped on it, leaving massive dents and chipping the paint. This is the moment that a simple decision on Keith's part would screw him and the landlord big time. "Not happening, pal. Your roof is ducked anyway. I'll get you a sheet of second-hand roofing iron from my yard to repair the damage on the roof, and I can come and hose off the dust off your deck and dog kennel." Cue the nuclear revenge. The revenge was not intentionally nuclear, but Brian had a dilemma that his roof was damaged, and he needed it repaired. There was rain and snow forecast later in the week, and he shouldn't be out of pocket having to buy new materials to fix his own roof up to a good standard. Brian is normally a calm and relaxed man, but this situation and the way he and his property were treated sparked an anger that I have never seen before. Brian got in contact with his insurance company, and due to the issue involving a roof, a building assessor arrived that day to assess the claim. The assessor would then be able to seek damages from the landlord or demolition company if he found them to be at fault. Brian also reported the demolition company to the local health and safety authorities due to their lack of safety precautions used when doing the demolition. The assessor got on the roof with Brian and was mortified to hear how Keith had acted in such disregard with the damage done to the roof, and his lack of an apology for any wrongdoing got the assessor mad. He then looked more concerned and bent down and picked up some gray fibrous material. Luckily, thanks to COVID, we already have masks on, Brian. This here looks like it is asbestos. I don't know how they got the sign-off to get this house knocked down in this manner. You don't know at the time of being exposed to this stuff, but if you breathe in these fibers, it can cause serious diseases later on in life, including lung cancer. I'll get this sent off to the lab for testing and we'll be in touch. Fast forward another day, and Brian was contacted by his insurance company. It turns out the side of the house that wasn't tested was clad in asbestos. Not just any bad asbestos, the worst possible type you can get. Insurance will be seeking damages to replace Brian's whole roof, not just the damaged part. The cost of replacement is likely to be around $20,000. This is the cheap part. The demolition site has been shut down by local authorities and there needs to be a massive decontamination of the area. This involves having to remove at least half a meter of topsoil on surrounding properties, test the soil, and remove more if there is asbestos still found. Areas with decks need to potentially have these removed so soil can be evacuated out underneath. The cost for this cleanup will likely be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, but who will pay for this is unknown at this stage. Whether it is Keith or Karen's insurance or them personally, time will tell. In regards to Brian, his family, and their dog potentially being exposed to asbestos, that is another battle for them to fight, and I will keep you updated. Update 1. I have just been on the phone to Brian for half an hour. His workplace was very sympathetic and paid for him to have 2 days off trying to sort things out. This is in complete contrast to Karen and Keith, who are yet to apologize and have made life difficult for Brian and his family. Due to the neighboring property being closed off for entry due to the health and safety investigation going on, it means Brian cannot even get scaffolding on his roof yet to fix the roof. Brian is worried now that the landlord is going to try to make his life hell. She is also a lawyer, apparently. Karen was the person that offered the old roofing iron, apparently not Keith. She spoke to her husband, who said that because the bricks dented the roof, it means it must have been rusty and old, so it doesn't need new iron put on. Keith did, however, go nuts at Brian for getting insurance involved and also the Health and Safety Investigation Unit who are currently doing the investigation. In regards to Brian and family still living in the house, according to the investigator, the risk is negligible, and the problems will arise when the debris is removed from the section. This will require a large tent, etc. However, the wind has been strong the last few days, and I feel the risk is still high living next door to uncovered broken asbestos cladding that is not being kept damp. Brian asked the investigation office person by phone about what to do about his dog and if they needed a vet checkup, etc. They were 1 m away from the fence, which is about a foot from the asbestos when it was broken up. They responded saying, "Do you think your dog will live more than 20 years? If not, I probably wouldn't worry." Brian is also thinking the landlord is probably scheming revenge of her own. Brian paid for a new fence himself a few years back to border Karen's rental. When he moved in, the old fence was half falling down. She refused to pay half despite this being law. He reckons because the fence is approximately 10 cm too high, she will ask him to cut the height down at his own cost, so it is in the perfect position for her new houses that are to be built. Brian's plan is that he will pull the nice expensive fence down entirely, and put 600mm high chicken wire mesh up, as this is all that is required by law, and there is nothing she can do about it legally as he paid for and built the fence. I will continue to keep you all updated. Also, as I know the local newspaper editor, I have offered to go with Brian to discuss this story with them once the investigation is completed, if Karen tries to make life difficult, and also expose Keith for his dirty practices. Keith's company has just been awarded a multi-million-dollar contract for demolition of an old car factory, and this would raise some eyebrows. Update 2. A very small update, but not great news. I feel this story, as many have suggested, will not conclude in a warm, fuzzy feeling of ultimate revenge as things progress. Firstly, Brian informed me a fence has gone up around the exposed parts of the neighboring property. This is only to stop people from publicly going over to the debris pile and scavenging, etc., then exposing themselves to the broken asbestos cladding. Brian also needed to take 2 full days off work when this happened to try to sort out all the situation and reduce stress on his wife. Talking with all parties involved, so he was down 2 days' wages coming up to Xmas, but his kind boss has paid him special leave for taking them off. The insurance company, after further clarification, will be only paying out for 1/4 of the roof and flashings. Brian will have to find funds to pay for the rest. This section of the roof is, however, the most expensive as it encompasses a large complex parapet gutter, roofing iron, and flashings. The cost is around $8,000/120K ZAR. The next one is an entitled people story. It had been a long year for me. I had been studying abroad in France, and I had made sure to pay all my bills before I left. I had left my car parked in front of my house, as it was common for people to do so in my neighborhood. Little did I know that my life was about to turn upside down. Upon my return, I was shocked to see that my car was gone. I searched my mailbox and found a ton of letters from my neighborhood HOA informing me that my car had been towed due to a new rule they had enacted while I was away. I was dumbfounded. I had no idea this rule had been created, let alone that it had been put into effect. Because I was out of the country, I had no way of moving my car into my garage, and as a result, it had been towed and crushed. I was angry and frustrated about what had happened, and I knew I had to take action against the HOA. However, my attempts to resolve the issue through conversations with the HOA members were futile, and I realized that I had to take legal action. The situation was complicated by the fact that the HOA had been in turmoil for months leading up to my return. There was a deep divide between those who wanted to implement the new parking rule and those who were against it. The HOA meetings had been heated, with shouting matches and arguments breaking out frequently. The tension was palpable, and it was evident that something was about to give. It was during one of these meetings that the decision to tow cars parked on the street was made. The HOA had hired a towing company that made money for every car it towed, and they had been towing cars left and right, even those belonging to guests. This was a blatant violation of the rights of the homeowners, and many were unhappy about it. I soon found out that my situation was not unique. Many of my neighbors had been in a similar situation, with their cars being towed and impounded. There was a feeling of helplessness and frustration that was palpable in the community, and people were desperate for a solution. I decided to take my case to court, and I spent months preparing my case. I gathered evidence, including videos from my neighbor's security camera that showed an HOA member slashing my car's tires and smashing its windows to make it look abandoned. I also had proof that I had informed the HOA before leaving the country, so I wasn't expected to maintain any new rules that were enacted while I was gone. Finally, the day of the trial arrived. The courtroom was packed, with homeowners from the neighborhood attending in solidarity. The HOA members looked nervous and agitated, realizing that the tide had turned against them. After hours of testimony and cross-examination, the verdict was finally delivered. The judge ruled in my favor, stating that the HOA had acted illegally and had violated my rights as a homeowner. The HOA was ordered to pay for a car that was equivalent to the one I lost, and because they couldn't find an exact match, they had to get me a newer model. But my victory was just the beginning of the HOA's problems. The judge's ruling set a precedent, and other homeowners began to file lawsuits against the HOA for similar reasons. The pressure became too much for the HOA president, and he resigned. The rest of the members soon followed suit, and a new HOA team was appointed. The new team recognized the problems that had led to the previous HOA's downfall and set about fixing them. They got rid of the parking rule and put in place a more equitable and reasonable policy that respected the rights of homeowners. They also severed ties with the towing company and made it clear that only law enforcement officers had the right to tow cars. The new HOA team was transparent and accountable, keeping homeowners informed about decisions and encouraging their input. They held town hall meetings and listened to residents' concerns, making changes where necessary. They also worked to repair the damage done to the community's trust and fostered a sense of unity and belonging. As the community healed and moved forward, I felt a sense of relief and vindication. My legal battle had brought about significant changes, not just for me, but for the entire neighborhood. I knew that my car, while an unfortunate casualty, had played a role in sparking a much-needed revolution. But my story wasn't over yet. A few months after the trial, I received a surprising letter in the mail. It was from the towing company that had impounded and crushed my car. They were apologizing for their role in the whole affair and acknowledging that their actions had been wrong. They offered me a full refund of the impound fees, plus compensation for the value of my car. I was shocked by the letter and wondered why the towing company had suddenly decided to make things right. But it didn't matter. The money they offered me would go a long way in helping me get back on my feet after a difficult year. I accepted their offer and used the money to buy a new car, one that I loved even more than my old one. As I drove my new car around the neighborhood, I couldn't help but smile. My legal battle had been long and arduous, but it had been worth it. I had stood up for my rights as a homeowner and had brought about much-needed change in my community. I had shown that one person could make a difference, and I hoped that my story would inspire others to do the same. The next one is a petty revenge story. Sister-in-law is the kind of mom who always has to one-up other kids. She constantly talks about how her kids are smarter, taller, faster, etc. than her friends' kids. She literally bragged about them peeing more than her friends' kids when they were babies, lol. It was worse when my husband and I had our twins. Suddenly, everything was a competition, that her kids always won. One of my girls rolled over at 4 months. Her son had rolled over when he was just a week old. The twins both took their first steps around 13 months. Her daughter was running at 4 months. She didn't actually start walking until around 16 months. She even changed the weight of her kids' birth weights, which makes them both heavier than the current heaviest newborn in America. It's so weird that she feels the need to tell such obvious lies, especially to people who know she's lying because they were there when her kids were small. I got annoyed when she went from lying about her kids to telling me there is something wrong with mine. The girls are a few months shy of 2, and they're both healthy, on track, and hitting their milestones. Sister-in-law has become obsessed with the idea that there is something wrong with them because they're not speaking in long sentences. Of course they're not. They're not even 2. They're both developmentally on track, but she insists that her children were speaking in 5, 6-word phrases by 18 months. Spoiler, they were not. Honestly, her son is almost 7, and I can still barely understand a word the kid says. My husband and I ignored her, but she took it too far when I got a call from her friend who works in early intervention, who was under the impression I was very concerned about my children. We talked, and her friend confirmed that yes, they are on track, and no, there's nothing to worry about. I finally lost my patience. Hey, her kids are breaking almost every record there is, and that should be celebrated. We had dinner with my husband's family on Saturday. Kids were in another room, and I decided it was the perfect time to give her my gift. A booklet I had printed and laminated called The White Claw Book of World Records. I printed all the supposed milestones of her kids, complete with photos and info of the actual world record holders now that they had been pushed to second place. She flipped through the first couple of pages, went beet red, and called me an a-hole. Her husband took it from her and got through the first page before laughing hysterically and asking her why the hell she was still lying. Apparently, it was not the first time they'd talked about her lying about their kids. She stormed out, but texted me later that night and asked why I'd humiliated her when all she'd ever tried to do was help me get my kids the help they needed. But if that was how I wanted to treat her, then she'd stop. So I guess it's a win for me. The next one is an entitled people story. A few years ago, I had a side hustle on my days off. My job had a rotational schedule where I worked 2 weeks and then got 2 weeks off. I made plenty of money at my job, but it didn't hurt to make a little extra cash. I was, in essence, a tour guide for the region I lived in. I didn't have any planned tours, but usually just took people to see neat places that they would not know about or think to go to. I was adamant about getting paid up front, and customers signed an agreement guaranteeing protection for my truck from messes or damage. Fortunately, I never had any issues, and people always enjoyed the places I showed them. Except for one family. They seemed friendly enough when I was having them sign a contract and collecting my fee. I should mention my fee was $15 hour plus $75, $35 if it was a half day. This covered a tank of fuel, plus paid for my time shuttling you around. I also kept a cooler with free water and some limited snacks. You were paying for my knowledge of the region, plus knowledge about the area's history and such. Plenty of times customers told me, "I've never seen so much cool stuff in one day. You could maybe find something cheaper, but I didn't care." Once money changed hands with this family, the attitude changed. They began treating me like I was a second-class citizen, but I had their money, so I didn't care. I drove them around to some of the most beautiful scenery you can find. It's rare people are left speechless by these places, and never have I seen someone not be impressed. Until now, every place I showed them, they just seemed disappointed. One of the places was a ski town popular with a lot of celebrities, not Aspen, and they were just like, "Hey, it's okay." I can't deny I was a little offended by their indifference, but whatever. They were never outright rude during the day, but they were surprised when I didn't buy lunch for them. As I said, you're paying for my time, food is on you. But when I got back to town and dropped them off at their hotel, it got interesting. The wife said, "You can just park in the back and leave the keys at the desk. Tell them they are for the Smith family." Me: "I'm sorry, what?" Wife: "This truck, just park it in the back, we might use it later." Me: "This is my truck, I'm not leaving it here, that's not part of the deal." Wife: "Oh please, there is no way you can own a vehicle like this. It obviously belongs to your company." Me: "I do this job self-employed on my days off from my regular job. I assure you this is my truck. I can show you my name on the title." Wife: "Young man, I had just turned 30. If you don't do as you're told, I will be forced to call your boss." Me: "You mean me? I am my boss." Wife: "Okay, smartass, get your boss on the phone right now." I thought about just driving off. It's 8 p.m., but then I had a better idea. I called my supervisor at my real job. We'll call him Dan. Dan had been in the oil field for 14 years and could be quite the cusser. A good supervisor, he knew what I did on my days off and even sent people my way a few times. He answered and I just said, "One of my clients is demanding to speak with my boss, so here she is," and handed her my phone. Wife, sounding smug: "I tried to tell your driver to leave the truck here so we could use it, but he lied and said he owns it." I could hear him yelling, "Are you ducking, stupid?" I didn't discern anything else, but I know he gave her a good thrashing. She just walked to the window, handed me my phone, and said, "He wants to talk to you," then walked away. Boss: "That fix your problem?" Me: "Yeah, thanks, Dan." Boss: "Anytime, brother. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.